Yeah. Hello and welcome. I'm Shalini Verma. Biodiversity is the variety of life on Earth in all its forms and all its interactions. It could be the most complex feature of our planet and yet the most vital. Birds, animals, trees, microorganisms, deserts, coral reefs, all of them are part of nature and are crucial to human survival. It is this variety of life on Earth that defines biological diversity. The United Nations observe May 22nd as the International Day for Biological Diversity. A specific theme is chosen every year to mark the celebrations. This year's theme is Our Biodiversity, Our Food, Our Health, emphasizing how biodiversity is the foundation for our food and health and a key catalyst to transforming food systems and improving human health. To talk more on this, I am joined by Dr. Prema Ramachandran, Director, Nutrition Foundation of India, and Professor A.L. Ramanathan. He is Professor and Dean, School of Environmental Sciences, JNU. Welcome to the program. And I'd like to begin the discussion with you, Professor Ramanathan, by understanding the significance of the World Biodiversity Day.
See, the biodiversity, the day by day, the biodiversity has been decreasing throughout the world because of our anthropogenic influences, and also we are trying to occupy their land, that is the area where the plants and animals lives together, and slowly there is a conflict developing. In that process, what happened, their habitats get affected, and that's how there is a conflict also start, and their growth, and they become stunted, and all these health problems for them is coming, and they are not able to move from one place to another because there is exclusively corridors. For example, if you see elephant corridor, so yeah, elephant corridors, it moves, it has to have thousands of kilometers, it has to move from one place to the another in order to, because they cannot stay in one place. The animals try to move from one place to another and then feed on the different, because basically when the animals move from one place to another and eat the plants, and then they are responsible for the migration of this species, because their excreta, when they move from one place to another, they drop in different
How
places.
do you look at the specific theme this year, which is on biodiversity, food and health? It talks of this great linkage between the three.
Because obviously if there is a forest in the region, you will get a water, because the eco-hydrology, if there is a rain, that forest helps in one is that evapotranspiration, another one is it store the water and then allows them to stay, and then to the groundwater it goes, and then springs and the streams will develop in that one. The water is the main thing, and then that helps to develop the food in the adjoining regions. Different plant species will grow, animals also eat, and we also get the things in that one. So, the food is linked to the forest ecosystem,
Right.
and then the water is basically, if there is no water, there is no agriculture, there is no food productions in the regions. So, if there is a change in the water quality or change in the temperature, that obviously affect the animal health as well as the human health in the regions.
Right.
There is a linkage between all these three compartments in this region. That is why I think they chosen
This particular theme.
biodiversity.
Dr. Ramachandran, but the interesting part is that it's not just the biodiversity affecting our food and health, it's also the other way around. If you can please tell us as to how these three are interdependent on each other.
People know that their life depends on food, and food is essential for nutrition, and optimal nutrition is essential for health. So, the interlinkages there have been well realized. In India is 2.5% of global mass and had always supported successfully 17% of global population, which means that these people understood and sustained the ecological diversity to support human food and nutrition trade. There had been problems in the recent years because population started growing very rapidly, because health was able to reduce death rates. People realized and then will control their fertility, but in the interregnum population was growing, and it is important for you to feed them, otherwise there are going to be severe undernutrition. What did we do? Between Norman Borlaug, who developed dwarf varieties, and Dr. Swaminathan, who propagated it in India, from a food insufficient state to self-sufficiency in food production in a decade was achieved in India. But at what cost? Dwarf variety of rice and wheat overran every other variety in all agroclimatic conditions. But it does not mean that these varieties do not exist today. We served the purpose of meeting the food grain needs by concentrating on some strains. But at the same time, the agricultural universities and the agricultural research sector tried to conserve all varieties of rice and wheat, their germplasm, so that as and when required, you can always go back and research.
So, ma'am, how would you look at this aspect? What the theme this year also focuses on, that we believe to have belong to a generation which has much better access to greater variety of food items, because it has evolved over the years, and there is also this scientific experimentation which has happened here. But at the same time, our diet patterns, the global diet as a whole, has homogenized.
That is very true, but here the culprit is not biodiversity reduction. Basically, what has happened in the developed countries is increasing processed food, convenience food, access. What do? I will pick up a sandwich. I am going to really heat up a pizza. That is the enemy for dietary diversity. At the moment, India is not insecure in that fashion. Urban areas, yes, we are getting into this kind of a trend in some segments, but otherwise look across the country. Everywhere the cuisine had traditionally been cereal or millet, pulses, vegetables.
Right.
Whether it is dal, roti, sabji, dahi, or rice, sambar, sabji and dahi. Look at across the country, you will find the traditional food does cater to dietary diversity. There are lacunae, economics is a problem, vegetables are not affordable or not available. So, Indian dietary diversity at the moment should really embark on a nutrition education which will say, no, dietary diversity we can achieve, we are a diverse country and we will continue to eat what we grow locally. And we will continue to eat traditional practices, because that is what will help biodiversity on one side, human nutrition on the other, and through human nutrition, human health.
Human health. Fine. We will take a very short break now in the program. Stay tuned for more on the other side of this break. Welcome back. The studies suggest that in the last 100 years, more than 90% of crop varieties have disappeared from farmers' fields globally. Half of the breeds of many domestic animals have been lost, and all of the world's 17 main fishing grounds are now being fished at or above their sustainable limits, with many fish species and populations effectively becoming extinct. The loss of forest cover, coastal wetlands and wild uncultivated areas, and the destruction of the aquatic ecosystem and the environment is only adding to the problem, causing genetic erosion of agrobiodiversity. The fact that this sort of loss is visible, we know the kind of depletion which has happened around us. But how do you see that really impacting our food habits and also our health? Progressively, how do you see that really translating into the real circumstances around us?
Because if the biodiversity part, when you talk about that, they are producing the nutrients and in the microbes in the soils, which will have the larger number of varieties of plants, genetic and systematic one. And if you see the traditional varieties of rice, for example, if you see, all the tribal people still, if you go to the tribal area, that area is having that they have that 3 to 4 months of that harvesting, because that takes the nutrients from the soil and sustain in the low water moisture also. But in the process of making it short, everything we want in the short, we make it in a 1 month, we try to add something which is not in the system. Actually that is not transferring into your human health and system, which is affecting, because as madam pointed out, ultimately we come to a staple food, one or two mainly. Ultimately wheat, rice or something throughout the globe if you see, and some few varieties for proteins and all. But if you have diversity, earlier if you see, people take different types of grains, different types of plants. Now we are taking only 7 or 8 plants maximum. I think you can take it from the nature, because nature is having so many things that traditionally people eat several types of vegetables and cereals, that we lost it actually. That gives them actually the balanced diet in the region, but that is not happening in our
How
system.
do you see the biodiversity conservation, particularly done in India, and especially since we are talking about how close we were as a civilization also, we have thrived by the rivers. This is how things have been.
Yeah.
We have always lived with the nature.
Yeah, nature.
So how do you see our position vis-a-vis the rest of the world in terms of biodiversity's conservation?
Yeah, the rest of the world, at least they started with the, like us only. If you start them 20 years, 30 years back, they started what we are the represent position in India, but slowly they realized that we are destructing the nature in that one. Now we are in the position also that, so we cannot adopt something which is adopted there. For example, if we take Thames river model, we cannot adopt in India, because we have our different setup in the region. We have our agricultural system comes in between, and then we have the flow of water. There the amount of water, if you see that one, that flows throughout the year in a uniform manner. But if you see in the monsoon, we get the flood, we get the things in the region. So we should have a different system in that one, and we can manage in that one, because indigenous knowledge, we have to adopt the indigenous knowledge of the local, harvesting the water, because everywhere people thrived. In the dry areas also, if you see in the dry areas, Rajasthan or in Telangana and all, people have their own system of harvesting the water to control the evapotranspiration.
Yes.
And then they use it for the agriculture within a short period of 3-4 months, and then they variety different varieties. They don't, nowadays everybody looking into the cash crops or the where the rice or wheat, but traditionally the different cereals have been grown,
Yes.
and people eat that one. So there is a balanced diet. They balance the nutrients available from the local food, and then it is nutritious because it stays there in the soil for more than 2-3 months. Now every plant we are trying to make it 1 month or 20 days, and also putting artificial nutrients, which is actually,
I think that's a major problem here. A, we are dealing with extinction of certain species, which is a problem. There are things which are not available anymore. B, we are dealing with what we have today is adulterated. It is laden with pesticides, with chemicals. How does one combat these two situations? And of course they need different measures.
They need different measures, but in some ways India has a lead in this. I'm sure you know about the National Food Security Act, which for the first time introduced millets in the PDS.
Yes.
Where from will millets come? That came because earlier we had a mission which ensured that equal amount of attention was paid, not only for rice and wheat, but also to millets, and positioning it for drought prone areas. For drought prone areas, the farmers were very clearly told, we will give you all inputs. Grow the traditional millets. It is one form of crop insurance, because you don't, even if the monsoon fails, you will be fine. Second, we will give you information what is likely to be the predicted monsoon, and grow more pulses in areas which are dry. Now, we need pulses desperately. We don't have to import it at 3 times the cost from Australia.
Right.
So, when we did that, the result is that today we are self-sufficient in pulse production, millets are going out, and today it is one of the methods by which we bring satiety and prevent non-communicable diseases, because we tend to overeat rice and wheat and become fat, because physical activity has gone down so tremendously.
And the fact that whether you have the malnourished people, the ones who are undernourished, or the ones who are obese, you do see those micronutrient deficiency in both the groups.
Yes, and here again we had done something. I am not very sure people do realize, where currently India produces more fruits and vegetables than cereals and pulses, and we are number 1 in the total production.
Okay.
But what is hampering the adequate consumption per capita? If you are going to say production and divide it by population and look at requirement, we are producing enough. 40% is the losses. Now that is something that is phenomenal and should not be allowed. Processing has to be indigenized.
Right.
We should not go for the high salt refrigerated processing that West adapted.
And then you have the food wastage problem.
Wastage problem. So we need to go in for the traditional practice. Everywhere across India we dried our leaves, we dried our vegetables, we preserved them with no artificial addition. 6 months is the shelf life. What on earth is preventing us from doing it in a much bigger way? So this is how we should ensure that we grow, we preserve, we eat, and the housewives will thank you, because powdered vegetables, cut vegetables, if they are preserved and given to her, why won't she cook and feed everybody with vegetables?
Okay, and what about the challenges like climate change? How do you see that impacting the scenario now?
Yeah, climate change, actually the rise in temperature obviously the main reason for this loss of water bodies, and also the rise in temperature leads to a lot of disease like malaria and all those things in that one, and plants growth of the biodiversity. Animals also are changing their habits because of the they cannot survive in the hot temperature. When you reduce the forest, obviously the temperature is going to rise.
Everything from the aquatic ecosystem to the deserts, everything is being damaged.
Even if you see the coral reefs, for example, even if there is a rise in 0.1 degree in the sea surface temperatures, that is there is a symbiotic relationship between the algae and the corals. So the rise in temperature will kill the algae will not give the food to the corals will die in that one.
Yes.
Ultimately the productivity of the coastal area, the corals are the one of the main component of ecosystem, which helps to produce lot of phytoplanktons and nutrients, and also it acts as what do you call it, as a shelter for these siblings of these fish, crabs, prawns. They come and grow and then they go back into that one. So we are the one rise in the temperature and then acidity.
Right.
So we just make the ocean acid by increasing the more CO2 and dissolving more carbonic acid.
Yes.
And we are doing it both the way in order to make sure that ocean will not produce in that fashion. So the food security ultimately is.
See, absolutely, and at the end of the day, it's also our practices. We are dumping all possible plastic waste wherever we can.
Yeah, plastic.
And animals, we cannot forget the
Eating.
fact that we are killing animals.
Yes.
They are being poached. There is also illegal killings
And
which
you
are
can-
happening,
you can
and
see
it
the
disturbs the
incidents,
cycle.
yeah.
It disturbs the cycle entirely.
Even if in the forest, animals are dying because they eat plastic and it will not. Sometimes they dissect the animal, you will find more plastics rather than.
Very quickly, I'd like to know it from you, on the agriculture front, the food production front, what are the mitigation measures that have been taken here? Climate change, will there be climate change?
I am very glad that you asked that question, because it tells you the basic rationale for biodiversity preservation and germplasm preservation. He was talking just now about the sea erosion, and because of it you are going to grow more and more rice in an environment with salinity. Where do you get the saline tolerant varieties? We had them. Kuttanad in Kerala had it. Luckily we preserved it, and today what is your answer to climate change and the salinity? No problem for us, we will cultivate those there. You see, it is this rationality, adapting technology. If we had caused a lot of harm in a very short time, we also have the capability of understanding it, perceiving it, predicting it, preventing it, and seeing that the world survives a better place than what we started with.
Okay, time for a very short break now in the program. Please stay tuned for more on the other side of this break. एक मिनट ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिन के बारे में कोई बात Welcome back. Over the years, the depletion of biodiversity has been quite active. from habitat loss, excessive exploitation of resources, climatic changes, diseases, pollution, to poaching and killing of animals. There are several reasons for biodiversity loss and change which has led to growing concern about the health consequences. Biodiversity conservation is clearly the need of the hour, but how to go about it? One of the clear things which is often said is that we need to have more research, more spending on R&D. We need to really spend a lot also in order to conserve the biodiversity. There are some places where you see that biodiversity is pegged close to climate change, and it's said that the loss to biodiversity is going to be a much bigger problem than how we perceive climate change. There is no dearth of conventions though to fight both climate change and ensure that this loss can be prevented to biodiversity. But what do you think is the road ahead?
No, the health, biodiversity loss linkages are not that direct as you will find in food and agriculture, but the kind of conflicts that come whenever environment as a whole is affected are clearly seen in terms of health. Take Ebola in Africa, Nipah in Kerala, the perpetual problem of people coming in contact with animals which they normally do not, leading to diseases which have a very high mortality rate is a reality today anywhere in India, anywhere abroad, anywhere globally. So, we need to really figure out the boundaries and how to reduce these contacts to the barest minimum. It can never be eliminated, and R&D is therefore to identify hotspots to take appropriate preventive medicine. There is one another thing that is seldom clearly understood by people. We keep on talking about increasing antimicrobial resistance. They are also part of earth and they also want to live. Why on earth is antimicrobial resistance suddenly growing up so much? The general impression is, oh, doctors are prescribing too many antibiotics, and in India people are using OTC antibiotic. So, that is why so much. In reality, it is the poultry farmers, it is the animal husbandry people who, in order to protect their produce, indiscriminately use a lot more antibiotics, lot more other stuffs which really people were not feeding to cows. Mad cow disease came like that. So, all these you have to monitor carefully. Science and technology holds the key. Find where is the problem and find out the answers solutions and prevent it from expanding any further.
You know, one of the key things that you said was that one can think of creating a sort of genetic database and see that this germplasm can also be preserved. Now, how do you look at that aspect? Do we really need to think about this too? Creating a sort of database for all plants, single cell
genetic
animals?
data bank is very much needed because of changing in the monoculture in some plants, in some forest. For example, Delhi also we have around 20 species. So, now it becoming 1 or 2 species. In that process, the genetic aspect, that is always important to have the genetic bank and then work on the research and then develop it. That is what happening in our biodiversity parks in Delhi. We try to make the indigenous traditional knowledge so that that particular ecosystem genetical varieties will be preserved. For example, that hibernations, that animals which they hibernate and they have 6 months they can live without food. Their genetical genes will be also used to make something which people are dying or something. People are working on that one.
But Professor Ramanathan, can one be hopeful about all these big conventions, the things which nations have agreed upon, that they are going to, you know, some very ambitious targets have been set for 2020, 2030, 2050. Do you see any substance in these claims?
So,
are we really, you know, doing what we are preaching?
yes, you are right that, but at least there is a target is set for something to achieve. You may not achieve it in 20 or 30, but there is a momentum. In some countries pick up faster, like Europe is pick up faster. After that IPCC only India pick up faster to find out what is happening to the glaciers. Climate change centers have come out throughout India. And the science and technology has to go. We may not reach the target, but we are, that helps to understand. For example, basically we have the high resolution satellite, we know where it is this deforestation occurring, where it is occurring, and also the technology comes in hand. For example, some companies has developed in Australia, you go in the flight, at a time you plant the trees, they shoot up the things and go to the things and it grows there in that one. The technology, and today also paper you might have found that we have the ahimsa meat, which is going to, instead of poultry you are cutting the forest and biodiversity. So, you are making it artificially from the stem cells and make a meat which is having the same taste and same flavor. This is also one way to control the biodiversity.
So, all these innovations and all these very scientific measures are important. I will take concluding remarks from you in 2 lines, if you may please say what exactly it is that we need to do.
We need to understand that human being is important and he needs the cooperation and understanding from all other living and non-living people in this planet. And the minute we get that frame in our mind, we have the ability to think through. That is God's gift to us. We need to use it to get there.
Professor Raman.
One concluding, we are also species in that one.
Yes.
So, we should not think that we only survey other species. If other species are only, we can only survey.
Fine. Thank you very much for joining me in this program. Well, biodiversity is our safety net. We must conserve it, and the efforts should be collective responsibility of everyone: scientists, farmers, policymakers, governing bodies and public. To conclude, renowned biologist E.O. Wilson once said, "This being the only living world we are ever likely to know, let us join to make the most of it." That call is more urgent than ever. You can email your views and suggestions to us. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.